how we were really supposed to find that impressive. Wild Child seems to be wedged into a strange corner of the teen comedy catalog. Not quite forgotten, but not as remembered as it deserves to be. It's a film quintessential of the time it was made in, except for one aspect that was ahead of its time.
2 weeks in this place, and I'm going out of my mind. These girls are all ugly losers.
It was a soft launch for Emma Roberts' Mean Girl persona that would go on to take its full form under the guidance of Ryan Murphy, a gateway to the acerbic performances she's become known for.
Surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Quite a turn from starting off as a sweet and innocent Abby Singer in Nickelodeon's Unfabulous. Alex Pettyfer was still a relevant heartthrob when he played the love interest. Juno Temple was hot off the heels of two acclaimed films, Atonement and The Other Boleyn Girl, and it took advantage of the Anglophilia that was gripping teenage girls at the time. A fascination with British school culture born out of Harry Potter. And the soundtrack consisted of nearly every late noughties chartbuster. It was also, of course, Natasha Richardson's final film before her tragic and untimely death. But when I first saw it in 2008, and many times since then, I never thought I'd be doing a geopolitical analysis of it. Namely, how the film rejects the concept of American exceptionalism. Okay, I know that might sound silly, but just hear me out. Wild Child is unique in its approach to American attitudes towards foreign cultures depicted on film. This didn't occur to me until the release of none other than Emily in Paris, the widely polarizing Netflix original series that took over the internet discourse for several weeks, not always for the best reasons. It drew heavy criticism for not only stereotyping French people, but for how its titular protagonist seeks to impose her American sensibilities onto them, framing it as an improvement upon French work ethic and local customs.
No wonder they hate you.
Oh, not just this. They disagree with everything I say.
That's the French way. They're very disagreeable.
Your language is seriously effed up.
In his review for Premiere, Charles Martin writes, "In Emily in Paris, we learn that the French are all bad, yes, that they are lazy and never arrive at the office before the end of the morning, that they are flirtatious and not really attached to the concept of loyalty, that they are sexist and backward, and of course that they have a questionable relationship with showering. Yes, no cliché is spared, not even the weakest." The criticism wasn't just limited to French viewers. The Hollywood Reporter noted, "Plucky, cheerful, and arrogant, Emily plops into Paris determined to bring an American perspective to French branding, never once considering that her proud cultural ignorance is actually a weakness, not a strength." For many French critics and viewers, the proud cultural ignorance was a little too much. And the show has been roundly criticized, mocked, and dismissed for perpetuating stereotypes of the French, glorifying an unrealistic theme park version of Paris and absurdist plotlines. Emily in Paris is far from being a lone offender of portraying American exceptionalism as a positive quality, but it did help me realize what sets Wild Child apart. This is, of course, not going to be an in-depth political analysis of the concept or its many examples, but rather look into why Wild Child deserves more credit than it gets for choosing not to give in to a tired and frankly insulting trope. American exceptionalism is the idea that the United States is, as the name suggests, exceptional in terms of its history and political values. The concept originated after the American Revolution and really took hold after the Second World War. The idea that their ideals of liberty, democracy, and a free market put them in a superior position to other nations and therefore obligate them to hold the reins in global events. The advice and actions of the US government in international matters motivated by their own interests should always be heeded, and failure to do so must come with repercussions. Margaret Macmillan, historian at the University of Toronto and author of the book Peacemakers, states, "American exceptionalism has always had two sides. The one eager to set the world to rights, the other ready to turn its back with contempt if its message should be ignored. Faith in their own exceptionalism has sometimes led to a certain obtuseness on the part of the Americans, a tendency to preach at other nations rather than listen to them, a tendency as well to assume that American motives are pure where those of others are not. This by no means is a generalization of all Americans. Many speak out against the violence and injustice caused by US foreign policy, but it does unfortunately remain a prevailing attitude. And since film and television are mirrors to society, Hollywood is oftentimes a microcosm of this attitude. Military propaganda movies especially not only appeal to emotion, but also require literal approval from the military in order to use their likeness, with even some financial incentive being involved. With patriotism being the norm, many filmmakers have to tread carefully when critiquing the system, lest they be accused of anti-national sentiment. Which is why it's refreshing when a young adult movie has more nuance than ostentatious Oscar bait films. Okay, that was my awkward segue into talking about Wild Child. Let's get into it. The movie is written by Lucy Dahl, granddaughter of Roald Dahl, and starts off with our protagonist Poppy Moore getting ready to welcome her new stepmother into their Malibu mansion by trashing her belongings. Right away, the movie establishes a materialistic, post-capitalist state of overconsumption. At the center of it is a girl who feels entitled to getting her way and believes her feelings are the only ones that should be taken into consideration. She also has a little sister who never gets mentioned again after the first 2 minutes, so we're just gonna ignore her. Poppy's father punishes her by sending her to a boarding school in the English countryside where it rains most of the year. Boo. She's immediately hostile to the principal and students, including the movie's antagonist, Harriet, head girl.
Harriet, head girl.
How's your head?
I haven't had any complaints yet.
Harriet is an embodiment of British imperialism, taking pride in tradition and hierarchy. Unstoppable force meets immovable object.
You shake the hand of the head girl. Out of respect.
When the head girl has earned my respect, then I'll shake her hand, biatch.
I'm sorry.
Apology accepted.
She then encounters her roommates Kate, Drippy, Josie, and Kiki, whom she turns her nose up at.
Ew, that's carbs and sugar.
What a revelation. I had no idea.
And insults the matron by treating her like she's a maid who is there to do her bidding. She then gets her first taste of karma when the contents of her trunk get ruined in the rain, because she left it outside believing someone would deliver it up to her room. Later in the day, when she turns up wearing her own spin on the uniform, just because she can, she gets manhandled by her roommates who refuse to be punished by the matron even further for Poppy's insolence. On the very first day, her world outside of Californian comforts is crumbling. These losers aren't accommodating her demands like she expected. And to make matters worse, she has to eat bland British food. Ugh. Poppy also tells tall tales about her conquest and sends emails to her bitchy friend Ruby about what an awful time she's having. After another scuffle with Harriet, Poppy is sent to the principal who lends her a copy of the book Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. A story about a Victorian child thrown into a psychedelic dream world and has to learn to survive it. And though I don't think the reference is quite a line, namely because while Alice tries to navigate her new surroundings by trying to follow rules, Poppy is hell-bent on breaking rules and disrespecting her surroundings. Nevertheless, Poppy's breaking point comes when Harriet dumps a bucket of mucky coffee on her. Despite their earlier disagreements, Kate reaches out to Poppy with compassion and generosity, prompting Poppy to finally speak about how her mother's death affected her, something none of her shallow Malibu friends have bothered asking her about. This becomes a turning point where Poppy's heart finally starts to melt and she opens herself up to a friendship with people she never thought she could have so much in common with. But we're still not quite there yet, because instead of handling things with maturity, Poppy and her roommates agree to get her expelled by playing cruel pranks on everyone. And yet she continues to get a whole lot of leniency. At this point in the story, Poppy ceases to impose her sensibilities and we see some cultural exchange. This is most prominent in Poppy's physical transformation, trading her beach blonde waves for her natural brown locks, literally returning to her roots and accepting herself instead of trying to be someone else. Similarly, some of her Americanisms rub off on the other girls. Oh, and there's this whole romance subplot going on, but it's honestly the least interesting part of the movie, so I'm gonna skip that too. Poppy learns to use her strong personality to be constructive rather than cause destruction around her by leading the lacrosse team to victory. But just when things are looking up, someone posing as Poppy sends out incendiary emails to her friends and boyfriend. Dejected, she accidentally sets a curtain aflame, as you do, but puts it out. Moments later, the school is on fire, and at great personal risk, Poppy runs into the building to save Drippy. Her heroic moment, however, is short-lived when she's accused of arson and is put on trial, for once actually facing consequences for her actions. Imagine that! In a touching scene, Poppy discovers that her mother was a student there, feeling that missing piece slipping out of her hands just as she had finally found it. Humbled and defeated, she takes responsibility for the fire, but her newfound graciousness has earned her so much goodwill that all the schoolgirls take the fall with her. However, it transpires that the arson and emails had been Harriet all along. Poppy is exonerated and reconciles with her friends, boyfriend, and father. Having cultivated a compassionate, generous spirit, Poppy cuts the selfishness and hostility out of her life. And Harriet gets smacked in the face with dead birds. Oh god, are those the same ones she had at the start of the year? Ugh. The end. In conclusion, the heart of Wild Child is understanding, empathy, honesty, and nurturing friendships. Poppy unlearns her arrogant, spoiled ways through making genuine friends who care for her and who teach her how she can help others. That nothing good can come of only thinking about yourself. You see where I'm going with this metaphor, right? Reject American exceptionalism, embrace Wild Child. It should be noted that Wild Child isn't a very diverse movie. I had a hard time spotting any black or brown girls amongst the students. And the UK has its own issues with racism and xenophobia. It's not a perfect movie, but it is a heartfelt one, with a meaningful message and manages to poke fun without relying too heavily on lazy stereotypes. What are your thoughts on this underrated gem? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.
What? She was a grade 1 a-hole with a severe attitudinal problem.